Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another Brony Debates Live. We've got a heck of a topic tonight, suggested to us by Pony Cordero, who is joining us for the debate tonight. How are you doing, sir?
Good. We're still not doing zebra magic. I was told tonight was zebra magic.
You were told wrong, you dirty
Damn
liar.
it.
So, yeah, you might have noticed we got a little bit of a small panel here. It was hard. It was surprisingly hard to find someone who was willing to come on and balance this out. So I'm going to do my best to read the chat and stay neutral and just add in little bits of information as I see fit. But I'm sure it'll be fine.
Also, zebra magic is just drugs, so we're done with that.
Oh man, we're getting heated already. And with that, let's introduce Calbeck. Welcome back to the show. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, Heidi Ho.
Alrighty then. So, before I do the Patreon slide, Cordero, why did you want to talk about this topic tonight?
Well, it seemed pretty topical to talk about the justice system, especially with a certain event that occurred today, a certain acquittal of a certain gun-toting 17-year-old. And I don't know why we couldn't find anyone to argue against Kyle Rittenhouse to come on tonight. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that I told everybody in the Discord that if you argued against Kyle Rittenhouse's acquittal, Brony would personally come to their house and kick them in the stomach. Do you think that may have kept anyone off the debate tonight?
Not anybody with two brain cells to run together. All right.
Yeah.
So, and Calbeck, how about you reintroduce yourself to our audience? I know you've been on the show once before, but why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself so people know where you're coming from?
Nobody wants to know that. No, I'm one of the radical centrists who believes that right and left both have something to bring to the table. We are at a table right now, as you can see. It's between the three of us, and yeah, it's really about. I just can't stand tribalism. I like facts and process, and I've been fascinated with the legal system for a long time. I've been involved in a number of cases myself, including as a plaintiff. So, yeah, this is kind of right up my alley, and I did follow the entire trial.
Nice, and I happen to know Cordero is an aficionado of law as well, without having actually formally studied
words.
it. Well, how would you word it?
A, a slightly better than casual observer knowledge of law, maybe. Like basically any idiot who spends as much time caring about legal shit that I do would have the same amount of expertise that I do. It's not I'm not like smart or anything. I just have hours. And my hours are still nothing compared to anyone who actually works in the legal profession.
I accept your
it's
preemptive
laughable.
surrender.
Nice.
Well, this should be an interesting
Using my tactics
conversation.
against me. Jeez. Is this what it feels like?
Well, let me at least give a shout out to the Patreon people real quick. Thank you for supporting the channel, making my bills easier to pay, my content easier to make, especially those on the $10 and up tier, such as Pony Cordero, who's joining us tonight, but as well as Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministries, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden, MacManx, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Please check out their links in the description. They make some good stuff themselves. Now then, Cordero, give us a starting point here. So we're talking about does the U.S. justice system work through the lens of some landmark cases that we've had of similar themes, such as today, for example, Kyle Rittenhouse being acquitted of murder. Tell us what you think about all this.
Yeah, so I want to look at, does the justice system work? Because the interesting thing about the U.S. justice system, we like jury trials rather than bench trials. Like that's one of the big tenets of the U.S. Justice system. So instead of like, because a lot of people think, well, the legal experts should be the ones making legal decisions and not 12 random lay people. The reason we like the 12 random lay people system is because you have 12 de-invested people, 12 regular normal people that aren't invested or shouldn't be invested one way and another of how a case should go. Whereas if everyone is a judge or attorney or a legal expert making these decisions, it's very easy for them to be biased one way or the other. So we like the let's pull 12 of your peers together and just two reasonable people. What does that look like? And that's sort of the basis of our innocent until proven guilty system. But it begs the question, is that system working out very well? And the landmark cases that we're gonna talk about tonight are a good way to explore is our justice system good, or is it failing in some way? And there's many ways that our justice system could fail. I chiefly wanted to focus on jury trials, and is the jury system a good idea?
So I'd like us to define a term real quick before we move forward here. A jury of your peers. When I learned that phrase, it was framed to me as that the jury was supposed to be made up of people who were in some way connected to you, so that you could so that the people judging you could understand the nuances of you as a person and basically give a grasp on you as a character. So let's say, like tonight's example, we're talking about murder versus self-defense. Are you the type of person that would, that in certain situations would commit murder, or would you be more likely to find yourself in a self-defense situation? So that's how I understood the phrase jury of your peers, but what does that actually mean?
Okay, I actually just looked it up. Jury of one's peers. A guaranteed right of criminal defendants in which peer means an equal. This has been interpreted by courts to mean that the available jurors included a broad spectrum of the population, particularly of race, national origin, or gender. Jury selection may include no process which excludes those people, blah 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 blah. It doesn't exclude race. Yeah, so it's a jury of your peers is not necessarily meant to be someone in your community. It's meant to be like somebody who's on the same status of you. Like it's literally a random collection of 12 people. Although I'm seeing contradictory definitions, because I do see some define it as a jury whose members are from the same community as the person on trial. So I'm actually getting conflicting definitions as I look it up.
That could, in some interpretations, mean those two things could mean the same thing. Potentially. Calbeck, what do you think? How would you define jury of your peers?
Well, it's supposed to mean that you get tried by people who are similar to your community where you're from, i.e., this was actually something imported from English law, and it was a reaction to some of the things that were happening in English law that were considered corrupt by the founders in the Constitution. One of these was the ability for prosecution to import a jury selected from people in an area that already had a negative view of the person on trial. Like if you were Cockney, they would get somebody from like Northumberland. It's like, oh, okay, well, I just hate Cockneys to begin with, so I'll go ahead and find you guilty.
Yeah.
So it's really an attempt at finding someone in society who is not necessarily prejudiced against you.
And a modern example, for example, Rittenhouse was charged in Wisconsin, and specifically happened in Kenosha. So I don't know this for a fact, I assume that the jury was pulled from people in and around the greater Kenosha, Wisconsin area.
Well, yes, and incidentally, that would also include where Kyle lives, 15 minutes away across the border in Illinois.
Right.
And as it turned out in the trial, he has family, including his father, living in Kenosha. He's actually part of the community there.
Yes, I knew that.
He just doesn't happen to live right there.
Yeah, and he either did work there or used to work there. Mm-hmm. So he's got family. Yeah. Yeah, the whole he crossed state lines is really misleading, because it implies that he traveled like hours and hours. It's like I heard 40-minute. I heard 40-minute commute, but I mean, I have a 40-minute commute. If there was a state line between me and my job, I cross state lines. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't But anyway, we're getting into minutia. We're supposed to be talking about juries. We're already jumping into Kyle's case.
All right,
Yeah,
so
believe me.
Calbeck, what do you think about what Cordero said in his opening statements?
Really don't have much to say about it. I'm pretty much in agreement for the most part.
I mean, I didn't
well,
throw out an opinion. I just kind of asked a question about jury trials.
Okay.
Well, the thing is, it's not just about jury. We have, when it comes to the lawyers, the prosecution and the defense, the system is set up to be competitive. They actually are intended to fight with each other like it was a verbal brawl in many ways, with rules that the judge is supposed to adjudicate over. It's like, you're out of bounds, you can't do that. That happened several times in this trial to both sides. So it is a confrontational system, which to me, to certain extents, is a bad thing, because when it's confrontational, you'll have people who decide all I'm here for is to either get my client off or to, on the other side, to get a win in the prosecution docket.
Yeah, and you're there for the W.
Yeah, and it winds up a lot of the time with justice actually being suborned to that. And that is actually supposed to be the judge's role. The judge is supposed to say if something is obviously unjust, he steps on it. But because of 200 years of judicial, tradition, basically, there's more to it than that. But judicial tradition in the United States has made judges more hands off, and I think that has led to a lot more unjust verdicts.
Could be, because the idea of zealous advocacy, the idea of zealous advocacy in this confrontational system, which you're correct, that's how it's set up, is that if one side is zealously trying to defend and the other side, prosecution, is zealously trying to prosecute, and they're both reaching towards a goal of winning, that you will discover the truth. That's the idea. Your lawyer is not there to find it's not on your lawyer to find the truth. It's on your lawyer to prove that you are innocent. Like, so if there's things in your lawyer's argument, like that your lawyer could bring up that are against your client, it's not his job to be like, well, here's the whole picture, here's the whole truth. No, it's your lawyer's job to show why you are innocent. And it's the other lawyer, the prosecutor's job, to show absolutely why you are guilty. Because if you have your supposed zealous advocate is going, well, yes, my client is innocent, but then again, there's also these and these facts that make my client look bad. But I think overall, my client. No. Your job is to bring up the innocent stuff, and their job is to bring up the guilty stuff, and then the truth will be found with zealous advocacy competing on both sides. That's the theory behind it. Yeah, and I like it. I think it's a good system. Like, can you imagine if your lawyer was required to also bring up the points that might, and the evidence that might work against him, because both sides are supposed to be like truth finding or whatever? Like, that actually sounds way worse. It'd be like, I'd be like, dude, why is my lawyer talking about the stuff that makes me look bad? You know what I mean? Like,
right. And I think that is a great theory right there. If it works. I think the problem that we both may have with the judicial system as it is it is tending not to work that way for a variety of reasons.
Yes, and do we have examples? We might have examples tonight of where it didn't work out. That was a segue opportunity, but
it's like, Brony, you've got people in agreement here. What's wrong with this debate?
Okay, so hopefully I can fix that here. Cordero, before the stream, you had mentioned that there was one major problem with the Rittenhouse trial that you wanted to bring up.
Yes.
All right, go for it.
So yeah, we failed to find, full disclosure. I actually agree with the acquittal. But we failed to find somebody who actually personally disagrees with the acquittal who was willing to come on tonight. However, one challenge that the Kyle Rittenhouse defense faced, and I didn't fully watch all of the trial coverage. I caught some of it, but an interesting thing was that Wisconsin is a stand your ground state. It's similar to Florida and other states that have stand your ground laws. But the thing about stand your ground laws and with the idea of self-defense is that you have the right to stand your ground in your property on a place that you own. Kyle Rittenhouse may be part of the community of Kenosha, and Kyle Rittenhouse may have or worked in Kenosha, and you know what? The owners of businesses may have even asked him to help them defend their businesses. Here's the problem. He doesn't own any of that property. None of that is his land or his house or his business. So when it's not your property, you do have a duty to flee. You have a duty to retreat, which means that if your life is in danger and you're not on your own property, even in a stand your ground state, it is your duty to get the hell out of there, to see to your own survival. You're allowed to have a gun, you know, you're allowed to carry and all of that stuff. And if your life is in danger, you're allowed to shoot back at people. But the prosecution did bring up this point pretty well. I watched a clip of it, and that's that every single shot that Kyle Rittenhouse fired, he was responsible for. Meaning that even if the first few shots or the first situation was defensible, as in he was acting in self-defense, once he's out of immediate danger, he now has a duty to get out of there. So considering how many victims or how many assailants he had to deal with to defend his life, the state was trying to make the case that after the initial danger is gone, you got to get out of there. And the idea of him standing his ground and holding that position with a weapon is not self-defense. He has a duty to flee and protect his own life. And the fact that even if he wasn't there looking for trouble, even if you justify that he has a reason to be there with a weapon, once his life is in danger, he has a duty to get himself out of there, and he failed to do that, and 2 people ended up dead.
Calbeck, I have some questions.
I have to correct this, but
yeah, I was going to say I have some questions, but I want Calbeck to speak first.
What you're quoting is actually castle doctrine. That is, defend your home or property law, and that's not what Wisconsin has. Wisconsin has stand your ground law, which is public area. It is not a matter of home defense. It's not a matter of... In fact, the prosecution repeatedly pointed out that merely defending property is not lawful self-defense in Wisconsin. It is a stand your ground state where you are not required to retreat if you are attacked. Now, that being said, Rittenhouse, according to all the testimony, like I said, I watched the entire week. I saw all the video that they showed everybody. He flees from Rosenbaum, fires only when Rosenbaum is close enough that the powder from the rifle actually stipples his skin, which, according to the medical examiner, is when he's within 1 to 4 feet. So,
and Rosenbaum's the first guy, right?
Rosenbaum's the first guy who charged him, yes. So at that point, yes, he is fleeing. He is using lawful self-defense, even if we were talking about a duty to flee state. Nonetheless, the prosecution tried to say he didn't flee far enough, but when his pursuer is 1 to 4 feet away, when shot, you have to wonder how far is far enough. And they didn't make that case. Later on, he's actually running, again, according to the video, towards the police line. The police line is visible. They're right there. And that's when they hit him. And it's not a matter of him standing his ground. He is hit multiple times, stumbles and falls to the ground, and then is assaulted multiple times, which is when he's shooting while he's on his back. Yeah. So they were not able to make the argument there either that he had a duty to retreat. Even if that had been the case, it would have still qualified in a castle doctrine scenario.
Right. Well, I looked up the Wisconsin stand your ground laws, and I found something that was updated last on February 11th. So this was before the trial, before it could be politicized and all that stuff. So just the idea of the sort. This is Giffords.org Law Center for Wisconsin. And it says that self-defense laws in the U.S. typically justify a person's use of lethal force in public situations where lethal force was necessary to prevent imminent death or seriously bodily harm to themselves or another person. Makes sense, self-defense. Traditionally, these laws have been clear that taking human life is not necessary and therefore not justified if the person could have avoided using lethal force by retreating or simply stepping away from the confrontation. A person does not have a duty retreat from a conflict before using force in their and that then it goes over castle doctrine, like you're saying. Stand your Wisconsin law. Wisconsin does not have a stand your ground law. The state's case law allows juries to consider a failure to retreat when evaluating the necessity of a person's use of force in public. So Wisconsin does have a duty to flee in public. But I guess what you're saying is that between all of the attackers, there was the defense able to prove that there was never a moment where Kyle could have gotten himself out of there without additional lethal force. Because remember, lots of shots fired, 2 people dead and another guy injured, I believe.
That is correct. The problem still comes up, though, that there is still no duty to flee in Wisconsin, and that was something that was brought up.
It says there is.
That is an opinion being made by a lawyer, but in actual law, it's not, because the thing is they don't have a formal law either way. It's considered let me finish. It is considered by default a stand your ground state because the standard for self-defense is if you believe that your life is in imminent peril. If you believe you're in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. And that last part is why it was lawful for him to shoot Huber, who had the skateboard. A skateboard, a lot of people would say, well, you have to batter on somebody for a while to kill them, but it doesn't take much to cause somebody serious bodily harm, say with a club to the head, which actually happened.
May I interject?
A skateboard to the head will definitely kill you.
Oh, it certainly can. It's a cranium, that boy, as somebody said.
Yeah, may I interject here? So, I've studied anatomy quite a bit, and I've studied a lot of self-defense situations. I've seen people get taken out by barely visible nicks. I've seen people survive, just being completely opened up by large knives or gunshots and basically things you'd never expect. But of course, I've seen it go the other way around, where someone gets hit with a big knife, if someone gets hit with a big bullet. It's exactly it, and it's exactly what you expect. People can get taken out much in the same way or survive much in the same way. A simple punch to the head or to the gut, and there's a million factors that are impossible to account for all of them. So if you're getting hit like that, the fact of the matter is you don't know. And that's why, you don't know who you're dealing with. You don't know what's going on with yourself or what, and that's why a lot of self-defense teachers say it's better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. Because you just, even if somebody is unarmed, if they're physically overpowering you with even just their bare hands and they've clearly won whatever fight there was, but they're not letting up and they're stomping on your head and you have no way of knowing, then then it's got to become a self-defense situation. You got to believe, you have no reason to not believe that they're not trying to kill you.
I think I need to clarify something here then. I just went ahead and double-checked on the actual statute for self-defense for Wisconsin. And the main thing found in there is reasonable belief. Mm-hmm. So a person has to have reasonable belief, but that's, of course, why it gets to be brought before a jury. Because somebody has to decide, well, was that reasonable or not? A person may themselves believe it was reasonable. And I'm going to be devil's advocate here. A bunch of people have made the argument that they thought the mob was responding to what they thought was an active shooter. And so they were going to disarm the shooter. Now, whether we believe it or not, personally, it comes down to, does the jury believe that would have been reasonable? Would that be a reasonable act of self-defense? Given provocation or anything, the jury found out that no, that was not considered, in the circumstances, that was not reasonable. But one could argue that it might be given other circumstances. So it's reasonable belief, and unfortunately, that makes it subjective a lot of the time.
So, in the case of whether or not this was a duty to flee state, I'm curious about an apparent gray area here that I haven't heard anyone mention. So Cordero talked about if you don't own the property, if it's not your business, you have a duty to flee. But does that also extend?
Unless your life is absolutely directly in danger. So
Yes,
basically,
yes.
the larger point is every single bullet that that Kyle fires, the defense has the burden to prove that that bullet was necessary to save Kyle's life and or severe bodily harm.
Indeed. So
If it was his house or he owned the property, he could just shoot him up and be like, they were coming after me. You see what I'm saying? The castle doctrine is stronger. Like, this is my property. I'm being attacked. Blam 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 blam. It's in self-defense. It's not his property, but he does have a right to self-defense if his life is in danger. But that means that every single instance of his aggression, they have the burden to prove that yes, it was necessary. What about this bullet? It was necessary. What about the next shot? That one was necessary. And you have to go through the whole scenario and prove that you were saving your life with each shot.
Yeah, that's not the question I'm trying to ask, though.
Did the defense do that? Did they prove that?
That's not the question I'm trying to ask, though. The question I'm trying to ask is if that is the case, and let's just say hypothetically Kyle had a duty to flee. He was asked to be there by either a friend or a family, I'm not sure which one it is, to help protect the business and to help, from what I've heard, offer medical first aid medical treatment to those injured. Since he was asked to be there and then chose to be there by the owner of the property and the owner of the business, would that still stand, that he had a duty to flee? What do you guys think?
I'm not...
Go ahead.
I'm not sure. I was actually looking that up because I wasn't there for all the trials, so I was looking that up. And now Googling stuff on Kyle Rittenhouse is absolutely impossible because Google is terrible and everything is
DuckDuckGo on Mozilla Firefox. You'll have much better.
Right. And everything is biased against Kyle in the media. So I just tried to look up, did Kyle Rittenhouse work in Kenosha, and all I get is like Kyle Rittenhouse. Anyway, apparently the one thing I found is that they asked the Kenosha owners of the businesses, especially the car dealership that got torched up. Apparently, Kyle asked them if they needed help, and they did not ask him to defend. Apparently, the business owners did not request for Kyle to defend their business, is what was in testimony.
That was what they said initially in testimony, yes. And then video was presented showing them actually asking the group that Kyle was with, including Kyle, who they posed with for photos. They posed with them for photos. And had video showing that yes, they had over 130 vehicles destroyed. They needed help. They were very happy to have these people here. The going theory is that may have endangered their insurance claims for their vehicles by bringing in basically unregistered security. In other words, you want your claims for your vehicles to be legit and paid for. Well, you may have to actually get a professional security outfit instead of just a bunch of locals with rifles.
So after they testified that no, we did not ask Kyle or anyone else to help defend our business with force, video came out showing them literally asking Kyle and other people to help defend their business with force. Yeah,
Kyle was actually asked by a friend of his family to come along. He was not the guy that they approached.
Yeah.
So he was just like, oh, well, this is my sister's boyfriend saying we're going to go and help this guy. And so it doesn't even come down to that. But going to the Castle Doctrine question, that it's not his property, that is true. But I went ahead and just checked out duty to flee here. Wisconsin. Okay, while Wisconsin does not impose a duty to retreat, and this is from WisconsinCriminalDefense.com for anybody who wants to look it up.
Yeah.
From 2018. So this is well before. Juries are still allowed to consider whether a defendant had an opportunity to retreat, whether or not it was necessary to use deadly force in self-defense. However, if an individual provokes a confrontation, then they definitely have a duty to retreat. So had Rittenhouse provoked the whole thing, then he had a duty to retreat, and he was not allowed to open fire, which is where the prosecution got into it with what they called the unicorn video later on, which I find highly offensive.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. Well, does Kyle Rittenhouse standing on property with the gun is like what is considered a provocation? Because that was another big.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that doesn't qualify.
I knew the answer to that when I was asking it. See, this is my argument in favor of jury trials. Like, I disclose my actual beliefs. I actually do think he should be acquitted. I did say that on the stream before, but I'm literally coming in here trying to make a case against Kyle. Like, I was looking up stuff and all of that, and the more you get the facts of a case, when you give 12 reasonable people the cold hard facts, this is what the law said, and this is what happened. It's amazing how often 12 random strangers will come to the right conclusion when presented with the facts. And so I'm over here trying to make a good faith. I'm not gonna. I didn't want to come in here being like, well, Kyle was clearly a white supremacist looking to kill black people, and unfortunately ran into 3 race traitors and decided to kill them instead. I wasn't gonna be marching in here, with Twitter's arguments against Kyle. But I was trying to make a good faith logical argument about why Kyle maybe should be held accountable, and it's difficult. The more we get into facts, the more we get into statutes and what was actually said in the trial, the harder it is to not lean towards self-defense. And so my failure to represent the anti-Kyle side, I think speaks to the quality of jury trials. And yes, I'm turning my defeat into a win. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Okay.
Maybe I can help you there. I
Go
can
for it,
actually
Calbeck.
Before the trial, before actually watching the whole trial and really getting into the minutiae of reading the laws myself, I actually thought that it was a reasonable argument that Rittenhouse should not have had the firearm in the first place. He was a minor at the time. Yeah. He was a minor at the time, and he's in possession of an AR-15, which incidentally is a sporter rifle. It's a lot of people think that that's a military-grade weapon. No, any military that uses that deserves to. So it's a semi-automatic rifle. It's mainly used in plinking and hunting. I mean, that's you can make it a Ruger. It's the same thing. Anyways, that all by the side. Big scary rifle, black with the wreath. And anyways, I'm sorry, I'm derailing my derail.
That's fine.
So
the idea is that you're supposed to be an adult to own like a handgun or a concealable weapon, but rifles, you're supposed to be allowed to take your 16-year-old deer hunting, especially in states that have like Wisconsin that have lots of, you know what I mean? Like
right.
Like you can take your 16-year-old hunting, but they have to be over 18 to hold a theoretically concealable weapon. It makes sense when you look at the laws and how they're written and how they're enforced. It makes sense. People are going like, look at me, I'm already on the other side. People are arguing like he wasn't supposed to have a gun at all. He got off on a technicality of that. The hunting rifle thing is not a technicality. You're supposed to be able to go hunting, with your kids in these states, but a weapon that's clearly designed for self-defense or straight up murder, like a handgun, those are the regulated weapons.
And I would actually go a little bit further than that, because he obviously was not hunting. That was not the purpose he had it for. But the thing is, he did not.
It's just to show he was allowed to have it. It's just to show he's allowed to have it.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but there's a little bit more to that.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that he bought the gun, which would also be illegal, or that it was straw purchased for him.
We switch sides.
Well, I've told you guys before, I'm about facts and process. I'm not about taking sides.
I love it.
God damn it, I'm a radical centrist, and I'm going to stay that way. So, anyways, Dominic Black, basically the boyfriend of his sister, bought the weapon for him and then kept it in his care at his dad's house in Wisconsin against Kyle's 18th birthday, basically pre-purchasing a birthday present. When Kyle was brought in by Black to go and help the property managers defend their property, he actually had the rifle waiting for him, fully loaded with 30 rounds of full metal jacket in it. It's just, there you go, I'm providing you with the weapon, but at this point, he's also under an adult's observation and supervision.
Interesting.
So whether or not he did something illegal by possessing the weapon would actually come down on Black for failing to be there to help supervise Kyle at the moment of crisis.
Okay. Because the rules even change a little bit when you bring like adult supervision or whatever into the. Yeah.
So he's a minor, but he's a minor supervised with a rifle. The he gets separated from the adults, and that's when all this shit goes down. Pardon my French.
Yeah, that makes sense, because even the idea of you can take your kid hunting, you're supposed to be there. You're not supposed to send your kid hunting. So yeah, the supervision thing, you know, that whole thing makes sense. But yeah, I guess we'll close and concede the Rittenhouse stuff, because maybe if I had more time to prepare, I could have had a more robust case against Kyle. But having not followed it day to day the way everybody else did, and I didn't have enough time to like prepare like a larger case. We pretty much went over the points that I had to challenge Kyle with, so I'm not gonna pretend or make any bad faith arguments against Kyle, which is why I really wish we had someone else who was actually in the other camp, because they might have more to say. But I can't think of anything else that's intellectually honest that I can throw against it.
Well, I do have a question. But go ahead, Calbeck.
I was just going to ask, should I bring in the prosecution's last-ditch bit about provocation, because that was important to the trial. It was important to the jury. In fact, they asked specifically for that evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, this goes to the unicorn video. This was dropped off like literally last Friday. This whole case has been going on for
totally
over a
real.
year.
The totally real, legitimate video where he's suddenly left-handed.
Yeah, exactly. So you have seen that. Yeah, and there was just this long fight about, okay, we're going to blow up the image. It's just like using a magnifying glass. No, Your Honor, that's not how video works. That's not how enlarging video from its original raw format to get a larger detail works. You have interpolation. The word interpolation became a dirty word during the entire process. That was funny.
Yeah, that's funny.
I've done IT tech support for 20 years, so I know what goes on in video cards. It's like, that's not how that works.
In layman's terms, I believe what's happening is in order to enhance the image and give you a clear image, the video has to take the data it has and basically make educated guesses on what it would look like.
Yes, and the educated guesses are based on the math put in by whoever programmed it, and it differs from program to program because of that.
So it's a good estimation, but it's still just that. It's a guess. And you are looking for very intricate details in this video.
And this was the problem. For folks who don't know, the purported issue of the video from the prosecution was that Kyle Rittenhouse supposedly switched hands and was now pointing the gun in the direction of the guy who initially fired the first shot in the air, a guy named Zemeckis, who incidentally managed to lose his gun and have it stolen that same night for some mysterious reason.
I know how that feels. All of my guns got sunk in a boat. It was really a tragedy.
Those darn boating accidents. I'm telling you, man. But but that was the thing. It's like, okay, here's this video. He's way off at the end of the street, coming out of the darkness. You can barely even tell that it's him. And then suddenly, okay, we're going to blow up the video, and now it looks like he's totally reversed the stance of how he's holding the rifle and pointing it up at a 45-degree angle instead of down at a 45-degree angle. And I'm like, okay, even if we assume that he's gone left-handed all of a sudden...
It's like physically possible. It's too fast.
Well, he's pointing it at birds. It's like, who is he threatening with this rifle? Well, he lifted the rifle. That's the important thing. It's like, okay, even accepting that, where is the person he's pointing at? Oh, they're behind this red light in the video. You can't see them.
I would say that pointing it up like that implies that he's thinking of firing warning shots, and looking visually to a reasonable person, oh, that guy's might be about to fire warning shots, is closer to he might shoot us next than gun pointed at the ground. That's definitely closer to being provocative.
Right. The thing is, you need basically 2 or 3 steps of logic to get from what they had to where they wanted to be. It was a bridge too far.
Okay, so I have a question here. Trying to get back to the topic of the justice system itself. You've both made very strong cases for trial by jury of your peers. So my question right now is, what is the alternative if not that?
Bench trials.
Okay, so define a bench trial for me.
That's the lawyers argue It could be a similar competitive system we have now, but the lawyers are arguing to the judge specifically, and the judge hands down the verdict. That's a bench trial. We still have bench trials in some cases, but most criminal defense is jury trial.
Okay, so Calbeck, what do you think about the a bench trial versus a jury trial?
Well, bench trials are actually how most civil trials are handled. And
Yes.
I've said before, I was actually the plaintiff in a case before federal court. That was a bench trial. There was no jury. And when you have a case like that, what you're doing is simply arguing the facts that can be proven by evidence against the law that's on the books. It's not up for a jury to interpret anything because there's nothing to interpret. Generally, a jury, I think, is more like a safeguard. It's a safety net in the event that there is something going on with a potentially very unjust verdict, either way, either for or against, and the jury has a chance to override it, which is not what the courts like to refer to. It's something called jury nullification. Judges actually prefer bench trials. Usually, this one actually likes juries. He likes to hand things off to juries, and he made a point repeatedly during the trial that even the sketchiest of evidence he was just going to pass to the jury because he thought the jury had the right to see everything that was put before them. And I can respect that point of view, even though some of this really should have been thrown out for not even meeting evidentiary standards. But yeah, that's really the difference. It's a matter of a safety net against an unjust ruling versus a ruling that is based entirely on the provided facts and the law.
And another difference between civil cases, which tend to be bench trials, and criminal cases, which tends to be jury trials, is the standard of evidence is higher in criminal cases than in civil cases. Yeah, in criminal cases, that's the innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's the highest evidentiary standard that we have in the legal system, because you're talking about a person's life and freedom is at stake. So we have a higher standard of evidence. So by making criminal trials bench trials, you are asking a judge, you are asking one human being to not only decipher what law should be applied, you're also asking the same person to figure out what law should be applied and what facts should be applied, and if those facts line up. That's a lot of shit to do. And you're putting that all on one person. That's a huge task, and it's a lot of power. You're deciding what law gets to be applied, you're deciding what facts are allowed to be applied, and then you're determining what those facts put together conclude. So a judge that means a judge doing all of that has the power to gerrymander what law is being used and what facts can be used to reach a certain verdict. So let's say the judge had a bias against the client or against the defendant for some reason. It could be like, well, this person would be found innocent, but if I cherry pick this law to be applied and only these facts are allowed to be put into evidence, well, then I can reasonably conclude that they're guilty because I rigged the whole thing, and I'm the judge and nobody can call me out for that. The jury separates that. It separates that potential conflict of interest. By the judge's job is to determine what law is supposed to be applied and perhaps what facts are allowed or not allowed to be in evidence. And then, okay, jury, this is the law. These are the facts. Now you decide how those facts stand up when compared to the law, and you make a determination on the facts. Right. So that it's harder to rig a trial that way because you're spreading out the burden and the duty.
Okay, I've got two more questions before we get into audience participation here, and I'd like to hear from both of you. So, you've made very strong cases for jury by trial being the best that it could be. In what ways can it fail?
Well,
what are the cons? What are the cons of a jury by trial?
This is an easy one.
A trial by jury, derp.
You said it twice.
Yeah, the obvious issue, of course, is that a jury is also prone to being persuaded, not necessarily by the facts, but by emotions, by weasel words, by any number of sophistry, I should say sophist elements of argumentation, whereby if it's like the classic bit with the Star Trek episode of "There are four lights."
Yep.
If you can badger a jury long enough into believing there are 3 lights or 5 lights, then they may just get disgusted and say, "Look, I've been in deliberations for however long. He said it was 5 lights. I'm sick of this. Let's just go home. I don't care." That does happen. It happens a lot more than it probably should.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who's served on a jury has run into this problem.
Well, any amount more than 1 is too many. In fact, 1 is too many. Any amount more than 0 is too many.
I would argue absolutely that is 100% the downside. A jury can be persuaded by emotion more easily than, say, a professional or whatever a judge or a lawyer supposedly could. But there's a very deliberate purpose for jury members to not be legal expert. When I was on jury duty, I wasn't selected for the jury, but they were asking questions like, are you a legal expert? Do you have legal experience? They deliberately, very, very deliberately want lay people and not legal experts. Because remember, you're not supposed to argue about what law should be applied. You're only supposed to be deliberating on facts. So they literally want amateurs. Very deliberately, they want amateurs so that your only focus is on facts. Because if you're a legal expert, you might have an opinion on the law that the judge told you to apply. And that will distract you from doing your job as a juror. So if you don't have enough expertise to even debate what law should be applied, you are now left to only focus on the facts. And while a jury can be swayed by pathos and by emotional arguments, I think that it pans out that in the vast majority of cases, and I said this before, when a jury is presented with the facts, they tend to come to the truthful conclusion. And Brony, to your point that even 1 is too many, I would argue that the potential tyranny of bench-only trials and the ability for the state or bad actors within the state to manipulate trials in their favor is way too great of a cost and a consequence compared to the jury's going to fuck it up sometimes.
There's also the issue that when it comes to jury trials, it only takes 1 juror to hold out and say,
hang a trial.
To hang a trial. So it must be unanimous. And that it doesn't get rid of, but it does lessen the issue of juries being tainted in this fashion, as long as at least 1 brave soul is willing to stand up.
And remember, a mistrial in that manner, because a non-unanimous vote is a mistrial. It's straight up a mistrial, no matter what. A mistrial is not double jeopardy. The state can go through mistrial after mistrial after mistrial and keep bringing the charges if there's no acquittal. So it just people being emotionally. So yeah, like you said, it mitigates the outcome of people being emotional because it's harder to manipulate all 12 people to the wrong conclusion. That's right. It happens, but that's difficult to do.
I certainly agree with that. When I said, but when I said if it happens once, it's happened too many times. That was just more of an idyllic sort of sentiment.
I got you.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question is, how can we improve the system?
And then there's that. I was going to say that sounds for a minute. But you go ahead. You go first.
That's definitely the hardest question of the night. Well, I do think it's pretty good the way it is. I guess because there were sequestering issues that came up in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because it's hard to find a jury that's untainted, because the idea is you want people who don't already know about the case or don't know facts of the case. But with high-profile cases, stuff that's going to be covered in the media, because you can't tell the media to not cover a story. Like, that's not an option. So it's hard to find people who didn't know anything about Kyle Rittenhouse and had never heard of that. And that happens all the time. It happened to George Flloyd, Zimmerman, any of these big cases. So in the social media era, it's almost impossible to find a jury that's untainted from scratch. So this modern era is really putting the jury idea to the test. But all the cases we were going to bring up tonight, and we kind of only talked about the Rittenhouse trial, which is understandable. In Zimmerman, I think the Zimmerman case was correct. That was the Trayvon Martin kid who was killed by Zimmerman. I think the Zimmerman verdict was correct. I think the Chauvin, the guy who killed George Floyd, I think that verdict was correct. Kyle Rittenhouse, I think the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict is correct. These were all public cases, and public opinion was tainted. In all cases, public opinion was tainting the trial. In Zimmerman, it was very popular to want to send Zimmerman to jail because the public thing was that Trayvon Martin was just a kid minding his own business, and Zimmerman just killed him out of nowhere. I'm not going to get into the details, but if you get into the facts of that case, that's absolutely not what happened. It's a public case. You can look it up. Based on what happens, it looks like Zimmerman actually acted out of self-defense. His head was being slammed into the concrete. Trayvon was attacking him, and Zimmerman fired in his own self-defense. Look into the facts of that case. They bear out differently than what the media portrayed it as. Kyle Rittenhouse, facts of the case seem to bear out he was acting in self-defense. Chauvin trial, the video shows, and the facts of that case show that Chauvin just straight up murked a dude, and the fact that he was a cop doesn't save him. He absolutely just killed a guy. So we're seeing these high-profile cases where the jury is definitely tainted by social media and the media and knowledge and coverage of it, and they seem to be reaching the correct conclusion despite this, because, and I'll say it one more time, you bring 12 reasonable regular people together and you just bring them to the facts and say, look at these facts and tell me what the truth is. And even with personal biases being there, they tend to come to the correct conclusion. So I would argue the past few years has been vindicating the validity of the trial by jury system. Defense rest.
I would actually disagree on the Chauvin trial, in that straight up murked does not appear to be supported. It is actually a fact. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But there's a lot of people who will think that that's dead serious. No pun intended. So, in that case, he was actually following what was in the manual of the police department. They did have an expert come up saying, well, I never trained him on this. Well, that didn't stop it from being in the book as part of the manual as a standard of restraint. In fact, it's used in a great many cities, the knee-on neck restraint. Personally, I think it's a bad idea. You should never restrain somebody by the neck, period. But I would think that would make it a matter of manslaughter if for no other reason than he held it for an extended period, maybe not understanding what was going on, because that happens with a lot of cops. Yes, the length of time. And the fact that he's not trained on it. If this trainer is saying, I did not train him on it, that's a failure of training. You should have made sure. I think there was a solid case for manslaughter at least. I don't think that you were able to reach premeditated, but that's what the jury went with. So I think that was a bit of a failure, but I'll give it a half point, because there definitely something should have happened regardless.
Right. What makes that case interesting is the idea of a cop getting convicted,
which is rare.
It's so rare. Like it's amazing that was even able to happen. But it did kind of swing. I will admit it did swing too far. In the other direction, because I remember going over that case and looking at what the facts bore out. Basically, murder one, absolutely not. Like pretty much impossible to prove if you understand the definition of murder one. Murder two, not impossible, but difficult case to make. Murder two is a difficult case to prove in that case. Murder three, very good case for murder three. Manslaughter, slam dunk.
Okay, so hang on a second.
That was my read on that. Manslaughter, slam dunk. There's no way around manslaughter. Murder 3, strong case. Murder 2, you're stretching. Murder 1, absolutely not.
Hang on a second, guys. So, for the audience who may or may not know the different degrees of murder, can we get a quick definition on those?
Manslaughter is an accidental killing.
Essentially, yeah.
Everything else is basically degrees of how much you hated the guy, premeditated the murder, or you had bad history, something that goes to intent.
Now, is one the most severe, or is
Yes.
One is most severe.
Okay.
One is most severe.
One is basically the equivalent of stalking somebody deliberately to kill them.
Yeah.
Without provocation or cause.
Premeditation. Murder one, despite what some movies may tell you, murder one is premeditated. You thought about it ahead of time. You planned. You're like, I am going to kill this guy. And you can prove that you wanted to do that ahead of time. You sought out to do that, and you did it. Murder two, often called the crime of passion one, where it doesn't have the premeditation method, but in the moment you made the decision, I'm going to kill this guy. That's often called the crime of passion one. Murder three, murder three is kind of a really strong manslaughter. It's a reckless disregard for the other person's safety. So it's a little bit more than manslaughter, which is an accidental killing. It's basically you should have known better. You were clearly doing something that was a severe threat to this person's life. You didn't mean to kill them, but you absolutely had the means and the knowledge to know that you should have stopped what you were doing, and it directly led to that person's death. That's my understanding of murder three. So murder three, very good chance of making that case. That's why I say murder three, very good argument, but not impossible to get acquitted on if you're just looking at the facts. It depends on what you can and can't prove intent and what they knew in the moment and all that stuff. Manslaughter, unavoidable.
All right, so Calbeck, what were you trying to say?
Basically what Tony Cordero just said.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like to go on a little bit of a rant here for a minute, if I may. Something to answer the question that I had asked of how to improve the system is... I was going to get into that, sorry. Go ahead. Well, let me just say this, and then I'll give the floor back to you, is I would like body cam footage to be more of a thing. And I'm sure that has its own drawbacks, but I'm also sure that there's ways to account...
the only drawback.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's because the only drawback is they keep breaking. It's the McDonald's ice cream machine of police equipment.
Because the only place to put it, an expensive, fragile piece of equipment, is in the most vulnerable spot. But
X to doubt that they're not breaking.
Yes, that's another thing that I was actually going to make that as part of my point. Because the two, we talked about George Zimmerman. Where it may or may not have been self-defense. And we talked about Chauvin, where there's a lot of video footage of that. Another one that we wanted to talk about was, to a lesser extent, was her first name was Brittany, I believe.
Breonna Taylor?
Breonna Taylor, I'm sorry, yes. So Breonna Taylor, and there was and the solution to a lot of these was body cam footage. There was another one that happened right around the same time as George Flloyd out in Nashville, where a black woman was killed, and the first question on everybody's, where the first assumption was police brutality as per usual.
Right.
But there was body cam footage involved in that, and we saw that it was actually very clearly self-defense on the officer's part. If anything, the officer was like,
I remember that.
Yeah, hesitated for a long time. Like, he'd already been shot twice and was still saying, hey, let's be peaceful here, before he finally had to return fire. So I think that's a solution there, because yes, I believe that, like, we've had cases where it's like, oh no, this guy was perfect and he got killed for no reason. And George Flloyd was a kind soul, and Trayvon Martin never did anything wrong. Like, we've seen a lot of that, and then it turned out, no, it was self-defense, or it was necessary, or it was an accident, something like that, or they weren't. But I will not for 1 second deny that police brutality is a real problem, and it probably makes up a lot of. It's impossible to say exactly how much or what the percentage or what the ratio is of deaths related to interactions with police, but I'm sure it's way more than it should be. once again, idyllic. The idyllic answer is anything more than 1 is too much, or anything more than 0 is too much. But that's what I would. That's what, and like you said, because those body cams keep breaking. In cases like that, I think it should be
hard quotations breaking.
Yeah, we've had a lot of cases where people get dash cam footage right from because all the squad cars have dash cams, but then the dash cams turn off, and then when they turn back on, someone's dead on the ground, right? And so and that doesn't just happen that conveniently, especially so often. So I think as part of the I think we need more body cam and dash cam footage to be public access right away. And if you take any amount of time in turning that over, or if the camera goes off for any reason, guilty.
I think that there is a major problem with this for one reason, and it's that body cam footage in these high-profile instances only becomes high profile because the press takes an interest, and they usually do so because they have a pre-existing narrative that they want to. I'm not going to say that's politically motivated. It's because the bean counters say, "Hey, this is a hot topic story. Anytime it comes up, we will run this story." For example, here in Mesa, where I live, yes, hello, I'm doxing myself. In the town where I live, there was a police shooting with an AR-15 on an unarmed civilian who was crying, crawling on his belly, trying to obey every order the officers were giving him.
Confusing orders.
Conflicting orders that ultimately amounted to a game of Simon Says. And the officer shot him point blank multiple rounds at a range of about 5 feet, maybe less. And nobody has picked up on. The press didn't care. The guy was a drunk white dude, and the case was over an airsoft rifle that he had been showing a girl in his hotel room. Somebody reported it as a long rifle. They responded. He did not have it on his body. His clothing, he was in shorts at the time. And they were saying, oh, he's reaching for a gun when he reached back to hike up his shorts.
Yeah, and I heard of that case, and that precinct has had multiple instances like that. Like, that was not isolated in the least bit. Mm-hmm. They were on video on security cam footage not a month earlier, choke slamming elderly people for no reason.
And had this happened to a black person, it would have been all over the news. We would have had BLM rioting down here, but this guy was white, and it just wasn't a news item because of that. So there have been no changes made here. Nobody protested. Nobody took to the streets. Nothing. Yeah, you've heard of the story, probably because we're interested in instances of actual police brutality. It's across the board. And I just want to put out one more factoid on this. Per FBI stats, if you are white and police are responding to a situation, you are more likely to be shot than if you are black.
Well, let me ask another question.
That's on a per incident average.
Yeah,
that's not population based. Per capita, right, exactly. Your chances are probably way better as white. But that's just, I mean, 13% of the population or whatever. That's the question, though, that I haven't yet seen any actual studies on, and nobody ever seems to ask, is what is the per capita? What is the ratio depending on race? And then I also want to ask the follow-up questions: what was going on? Right.
I did want to get back to your one question of how we could make the judicial system better, though.
Yes.
And we just got sidetracked.
Right.
I think the judges need to have stronger rules for enforcement of the rules in play instead of having as much latitude to ignore or play loose with them, which actually happened in this trial, in the Rittenhouse trial. Specifically, the judge was even yelling at the prosecution about Fifth Amendment rights breaches and saying, you're on the border there, or you may have gone over. Well, judge, if he's gone over, make that ruling. Either he did or he didn't. It's not a waffle word here. This is not Schrodinger's trial. Make a decision, and if it affects the case, either declare mistrial and do it over, or that's the end of it. If the prosecution... by the way, the prosecution is actually not supposed to be, I'm here for the W. They're supposed to be, when they're working for the state, they are supposed to be in the interest of justice. That's the theory anyway.
Right.
So when the prosecution is repeatedly misbehaving themselves, repeatedly trying to fiddle with evidence, and very clearly going over the line time and time again. There needs to be a shutdown. That didn't happen. I think that's why we had 4 days of deliberations, as the jury had to work their way through this mess.
I think what's hanging up a lot of judges on that is that zealous advocacy is heavily respected by the court, and possibly too much. To your point, judges do not like punishing lawyers for zealously advocating for their client, whether it's a defendant or it's the state of Wisconsin, or it's the state. So judges, they want to uphold the rules and keep order, but they don't want to be like, you're in contempt, or you're breaking the rules. They don't like punishing lawyers for passionately doing their jobs, and there's a blurred line of, oh, sorry, I'm just passionately doing my job and zealously advocating, and you are misrepresenting the truth and lying so hard that you've gone outside of the gray area into that you're disrupting the process, contempt of court, or what have you. And I think judges lean very much on the side of benefit of the doubt of, well, they're just trying to win their case, so I'm not going to be too hard on them. That seems to be the tendency of most judges.
And while I agree with that precept, I actually support zealous advocacy. My problem is that when you have a clear breach of the rules, and even the judges saying, okay, that's a Fifth Amendment privilege, you don't have the right to say that. This is established law for 40, 50 years, and I'm quoting the judge. It's like, okay, then rule on that, and I'm going to let you go ahead. What?
I think every judge is afraid of being the judge that stomps on zealous advocacy. I think that's my theory. I think that's what they're doing. No judge wants to be the anti-lawyer judge.
See, here's where we disagree. I don't think that's zealous advocacy. I think that's rule breaking, which is not just advocacy.
I do agree with you. I'm just trying to think of a reason of why judges aren't addressing this problem that I agree with you on.
Honestly, I think it's more because when it's the prosecution, I don't know about the defense, but when it's the prosecution, when it's the state's prosecution, they have to work with that guy all the time.
Yeah, that's a part of it.
Yeah,
I mean, they see the same defense lawyers all the time too, and and imagine being the judge that gets it wrong. So I'm just thinking from judge. Imagine being the judge, like, even if it's the defense. Let's say you're like, defense, you broke the rules, you're held in whatever. Now you're the judge that's like, oh my God, a poor defense lawyer that was trying to help out his client. The judge threw him in jail for doing his job. I think the judges are stay up at night terrified to be that judge.
I would have defined.
We should bring back. I'm sorry. Can we just bring back Night Court at this point? Just the cast of Night Court. Yeah.
I would have defined zealous advocacy as something in the spirit or in the vein, something similar to what we saw Atticus Finch give the speech in the To Kill a Mockingbird movie.
Perfect.
Well, sure. Just go for the most pure example possible. Yes. But here's the thing about zealous advocacy is, you cannot be. Defamation exists, right? Defamation of character and libel. Guess where you can't be sued for libel and defamation? In a court writing. Lawyers often in defense or whatever what they're doing. This is an example of zealous advocacy. They will just slam somebody in a legal complaint in a matter to where, like, if this was like a publication in a newspaper or somewhere, it'd be like, this is libel and I'm suing you for it. But it was said by a lawyer in a complaint to make an argument in court. You will never, ever, no matter how blatant they're lying, you will never see a lawyer be held to task for defaming somebody in a court document because it falls under zealous advocacy. It's like, you said a bunch of unfair, misleading, untrue things about this person in your court complaint document. It's like, well, I was just zealously advocating for my client. And the court 10 out of 10 times will say, yep, absolutely, zealous advocacy. It's really, really strong to the point where you can defame someone in your court document or in court. And it's, well, I was just doing it on behalf of my client.
And what makes that even worse is that the press can then cite the court document as though it's authoritative, and they're not committing, slander or libel or anything. We're just quoting the lawyers.
Quoting a public document, exactly, yeah. Backdoor defamation.
All right. So, real quick, Calbeck, I think you had an issue with my body cam theory, and I'm not sure if I just missed it or if we never actually got to it. But do you want to talk about that just for a minute?
Well, I actually did at the time. It really boils down to body cam footage doesn't seem to do much until it gets picked up by the press, and then activists charge out and start yelling about it, and then it seems that a court will care. Otherwise, I mean, when I was talking about the Schaefer case earlier, and you also had an issue with Tony Timpa pretty much getting George Floyded, and almost nobody's heard of him. And the body cam footage doesn't come out, and it doesn't affect the case, and the cops get off because there's no public outrage.
Okay.
So it's more a matter of practical usage. I mean, if somebody survives to get into court, that's like, yeah, call that in. This is what the cop did to me. This was wrongful, blah, blah, blah. But if they don't, then usually it's just, oh, our internal affairs people, they brought the issue to the court. Court says it's fine, move along.
Okay, so well, that's probably something that could be improved upon then. And how much does and should public opinion affect the verdict?
Not at all.
That's
well, the answer is definitely not at all. But how often do we think? And that's going to be a purely subjective.
Public opinion and outcry can be a great tool for stuff that's being swept under the rug and being ignored by the proper legal system. So it's not a zero. It never will be, and it shouldn't be a zero factor. Public opinion, because public opinion could be, just totally wrong and based on bad media coverage pushing a narrative. But public opinion can also bring to light, like Chauvin doesn't go on trial without public opinion, in my opinion.
I think you're right.
That case is just another cop killing a guy and getting away with it, if not for the real threat of riots, if we don't have some kind of case here. So public opinion is not, nor should it be, a zero factor. But obviously public opinion should not be dictating trials. The process should be there. I think for cops specifically, because while there absolutely should be a consideration for cops have a difficult job to do, and their job sometimes involves lethal force. So anytime a cop is on trial, you have to have the consideration of, were they acting in the line of duty, and how much of them even if they went too far, how much of them trying to do their duty should be considered. There absolutely should be a consideration for that. However, the one thing that I don't think should be there is there's this precedent, this unwritten, unspoken precedent, that because it's a cop talking, because it's the word of a cop, it's treated as more than the word of a common person. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's like, well, you have a regular person saying this versus a cop saying this. We're automatically holding the cop's opinion in a higher status because it's a cop. That I want thrown in the trash. I want the consideration. I want the consideration of cops have a job to do, and we have to consider how much were they trying to act in that regard, and that should be in their favor. But the word of the officer, especially if they're on trial and being brought into question, the word of a police officer should be no greater or lesser than the word of any other common man.
And I actually think that goes to the standards by which evidence is considered in court, especially by the prosecution.
It's not. What is it? Oh, God, what is the doctrine that protects cops called? Oh, it's been so long.
Let me go ahead and get this out here, though.
Yeah.
It's like, specifically in the Jacob Blake case, which started all this off, one of the things that people brought up was that he had been shot in the back 7 times. Now, whether or not you want to argue that the shooting itself was legitimate, it's perfectly reasonable to argue that the number of shots taken was excessive. The man is paralyzed for life. I don't know where you would exactly draw the line, but I'm pretty sure that virtually emptying your clip is, excuse me, magazine, I should know better.
Qualified immunity. Okay, sorry. Good,
yeah,
continue.
There you go. Okay, so there you go. We could argue about that. But in the case of Rittenhouse, for example, the prosecution zealously argued that in the space of 3/4 of a second, when he was shooting Rosenbaum 4 times, that the fourth shot, which was actually the fatal one, entered his back diagonally and basically went through enough of his organs to kill him. And this being the killing shot, he was like the prosecution was saying, well, you shot him in the back. Yes, because he was diving at him. The medical examiner said it was with his hands out like Superman flying at him. This is why he got shot in the back on the fourth round, because he's falling to the ground under the force of gravity. Bang, 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 bang. And the prosecution saying, well, after the first round, you should have realized that you got him in the thigh and he was going down, therefore he was no longer a threat. So you should have stopped in the space of literally a split-second decision right there, and you're wrong for doing it otherwise.
Yeah, it's not an anime.
Bullets apply the same logic to Blake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and we have a clear-cut, uneven, and this is not the defense saying, it's the prosecution.
Yeah, this is not an anime. Whatever the round is, it doesn't just blow a limb off and spray blood everywhere.
Well, you know that Kyle Rittenhouse was using VATS at the time, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, okay. That was all I had to say about that. I would like to get into the audience participation now if there's
the qualified immunity, because that was the full...
Oh, yeah. Well, that was... So, I've heard you, Cordero, I've heard you talk off-stream in the past about getting rid of qualified immunity.
Well, the Cliff Notes are the concept of a qualified immunity is good. That's what we've been talking about, that cops have a job to do, and you have to consider them attempting to act in the line of duty. That's what qualified immunity should be, and the concept of having that is good. Unfortunately, qualified immunity as written gives them too much immunity. Like to where like they until almost at Zimmerman, until Chauvin went against the grain and actually got convicted, qualified immunity was doing too good a job of protecting police officers from any scrutiny of what they did in the line of duty. It was too powerful. So I've said before, qualified immunity needs to be scrapped. Not that, fuck all protection for police officers trying to do their job, but as it's written is so bad, it needs to be completely overhauled and rewritten to where if a police officer acts up bad enough, they can be brought to task and they can be brought to trial. There just should be a higher standard because of their line of work. There should be a slightly higher standard of evidence and of you having to prove that there's a good enough case to bring a case against a police officer. That's it. Just because of nature of their job, that's what qualified immunity should be, but it's just too all-encompassing and protective, except for Chauvin, which took the threat of public violence for that to go the other way.
Okay.
Law's got to change.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to get into audience participation now. So early on in the night, we had Battleship Agincourt said, a child crossed into another state to murder 2 people and attempted to murder another. The judge defended him and ensured he'd get off. This was a BS trial, and the guilty were let off. And then I know Calbeck had some words with him in the chat about that and said provocation and illegal weapons. And then Battleship quoted him again and said provocation and illegal weapons possession were also not shown in evidence. He's quoting Calbeck there. And Battleship says that's exactly correct. The judge improperly weighed the trial to ensure that Rittenhouse got an unfair advantage. So, Calbeck, what do you say about that?
Literally none of that is true. The provocation argument was brought before the court. It was, when I say it was not shown, I don't mean that it didn't come into the court. I mean that the prosecution did not show that actually happened. They alleged it. They alleged the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And then they failed to make their case. So, I mean, the bit, for example, with him supposedly crossing state lines with a firearm, I touched on that earlier. The firearm actually never left Wisconsin. He lives in Illinois across the state line. He actually went into Wisconsin to meet the boyfriend of his sister, got the weapon there, and took charge of it in the company of an adult. That's all legal. He never crossed state lines with a weapon. And the bit with provocation, initially the argument was that, oh, well, you pointed a rifle at these people, that's provocation. But then the evidence came through. For example, Huber actually grabbed the end of the rifle, pulling it towards his chest himself in passing. You could make the argument that was because of the laws of physics. He was going past Rittenhouse while trying to grab the rifle, and in fact did grab the end of the rifle. But that's not Rittenhouse pointing the weapon at him. That's Huber pointing the weapon literally at himself and making it, you either shoot me or you wrestle me for the weapon.
Okay,
in each and every case that they tried to argue provocation, it failed.
Okay, so where do you think Battleship is coming from when he says the judge improperly weighed the trial like that?
The judge didn't weigh anything against, or I should say he didn't weigh anything against the prosecution. Each and every time that something came up, with very few exceptions, he allowed it to go through, including the video footage, the quote unquote unicorn evidence of video drone footage, which was then alleged as like, oh well, he switched left-handed and then pointed his weapon up in the air, and that's provocation. He allowed the jury to have that. Yeah. He allowed, and he stated time and time again during the trial, he prefers, it's his usual preference, to allow the jury to make their own decisions about evidence. He does not like throwing stuff out. So the idea that the judge rigged this on behalf of the defense, there's no basis for that.
You could argue that the judge stacked it in the opposite direction against the defense because the jury was deliberately instructed multiple times on the very specific aspects that would disqualify someone from self-defense. Mm-hmm. Like there was it was a point made of jury, you need to understand these are circumstances, and not and this wasn't facts of the case. They were just saying the provocation circumstance and all this stuff, like this will disqualify somebody from self-defense. Like the seeds were planted in the jury's mind that if you're looking for trouble, you don't get self-defense. And the media narrative of the trial was that Kyle was looking for trouble. Okay. So like if anything, you can argue that the case was being stacked against the defense because now, while they had a very solid self-defense claim, they're repeatedly telling to the jury that looking for trouble, and I'm putting it in layman's terms and abbreviating it, that looking for trouble takes away your self-defense right. Like that was beaten into the jury, and they still came to not guilty. And I also hate the rank and file narrative lines of the crossing state lines. The crossing state line is literally irrelevant. It's implying that you traveled hours and hours to go looking for trouble. Crossing state lines is inflammatory and is trying to push the looking for trouble narrative. He traveled 40 minutes. He traveled 40 minutes to a side of town where he has family and regularly commuted for work. I commute 45 minutes to work.
Yeah, listen, like, guys, if I
normal
drive...
work commute, it just really bugs me when people are like, he crossed state lines to do it. Is like, you're trying to make you're being told to repeat that sentence by people who are trying to push a narrative of Kyle was looking for trouble. That may have been the case. Maybe that was what in his mind, his heart, maybe he was out looking for trouble. But the fact is that he drove 40 minutes to a side of town that he was part of the community of. There happened to be a state border in between. It's so disingenuous and it's disgusting. And it doesn't matter what side of this conflict you fall on. That is such. As soon as someone says crossing state lines, I immediately go, "Oh, you actually know nothing about the case." That's my immediate thought.
Okay, so here's another thing, like to add on to that. If you or I drive east for 2 hours, we'll be in international waters, right? By the same token, we could also drive for 2 hours and not even leave the same city. You know, the way that Orlando works sometimes. Yeah.
I'd like to make a couple of important points here. First of all, crossing state lines is a federal issue. It's only in relevance to federal cases because federal law covers interstate jurisdiction. If a crime was being committed and it involved crossing state lines, that wouldn't come up in any state case. It's absolutely irrelevant to the case itself. And the second thing is, as people in the chat were pointing out earlier, the rioters who were definitely there for trouble, that was their whole point, came from 44 different states.
Yeah.
So if we're arguing provocation, and incidentally, provocation loses you the right to self-defense. That's the whole point of the argument for provocation.
Yeah.
If they're provoking Rittenhouse and everybody else in Kenosha, they're the ones who lose right of self-defense, which is why Grosskreuz's argument of, well, they tried to argue, well, he was acting in self-defense because you had a rifle, and that's provocative. It's like, no, you were there to riot. You were there engaged in various things. You came at Rittenhouse, not vice versa. You're the provocateur.
Okay. Guys, we need to speed up the answers to these questions just a little bit, if at all possible. Doughboy123X has a couple of questions here. He says, if the police can't or won't do their job, whose responsibility is it to stop violent rioters?
That's a loaded question.
Technically speaking, it's nobody's responsibility. You're not required to. At the same time, you have a right to respond to violence being committed against you and your community by people who are committing violent crimes. The only question is, was this a legitimate protest, or was it people who were there to smash things, burn things, steal things?
Well, that line itself is super blurry. Like, plenty of very legitimate protest devolved into that. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's only at the moment of crimes being committed that we're even really discussing, who's in the right and who's in the wrong. A peaceful demonstration should never have people showing up to it going like, I'm just waiting for somebody to kill. I'm waiting for somebody to jump.
Yeah, that type of thing does happen. Right
legitimate
here
protest with just causes.
Yep.
Have that happens.
Right here in Orlando, I remember that we were having our own George Floyd protest, and at 4 o'clock everybody was nice and peaceful, and people and the police were in on it, and they were talking to each other, and everything looked great. Orlando was being exemplary. 2 hours later, someone was riding a stolen police horse through downtown, and stuff was on fire. What the heck happened? So anyway. Let's see.
Human nature happened.
Yeah.
Those kind of gatherings bring troublemakers. No matter the pure intentions of the original protest and demonstration.
Yeah. So here's the second question. Should all trials be publicly streamed, or would that be a detriment to the justice system?
No, that's good. Speedy public trial. That's a good thing. The fact that we have streaming technology is a fantastic addition to our justice system.
All trials, unless ordered so by the judge, are in fact open in public. The difference is that they get no coverage, and most of them are not streamed.
Used to be the way. They've always allowed media. Yeah, they've always allowed media to report on it, but it was always like reporters were in the room, witnessed it, and then reported on it. I think live streaming is a great addition because the court report, like the transcript, is going to be publicly available. So what are you hiding? Why not have the video? Why not have the video as well? I think it was just cumbersome, and there's probably an issue of who had the rights to it. Like, what do we let Channel 2 and Channel 9 in? It was probably more of a logistics thing of filming courtrooms by news stations beforehand. Now that we have live streaming technology and it's a trivial matter and everybody has access to the public live stream, absolutely a wonderful addition to court. That is going to help our justice system by having these already speedy public trials become more easily accessible to the public. Very good.
With better access to source information instead of getting it secondhand, thirdhand, fourthhand through the media.
Exactly. You want the facts of the case? Here's the video for everyone to see.
Herman Silo, I'm taking a total stab at that pronunciation, is making a quote in the chat, says, I tell you, sir, the militia is the whole of the people minus a few select representatives, meaning the people delegate policing the police. If the police fail, the people must take on the mantle. I agree. I think you have a human right to self-defense. But, you look out for you, and you need to make your own choices, and you need to live with the consequences, whatever those may be in any situation.
I think that Kyle acted, while I think Kyle acted reasonably, that was his side. That was his side of town. His community, family, worked there, all of that. So that's a community he's a part of. I think his actions are reasonable, but I would definitely 1,000% advise against what Kyle did. it's not worth it. And I think the trial that he just went through and suffered is proof of how not worth it is. Do not go to your job and defend it with a gun, because your job would not defend your house with a gun. It's what he did is absolutely not worth it. And while he's justified and innocent, it was 100% a fool's errand.
I am going to partially disagree with that. I am going to disagree with the part saying that somebody who's responding to threats against his community is making a bad decision. They're making a decision that anybody 50, 100 years ago or whatever would have said, no, this is my social moral duty.
Yeah.
You could. The only reason that it's a problem now is because of what happened to him to smear him by people who want people to not do that, so that the rioters can have their way. Now, that being said, all of that being said, if you're going to be quote unquote militia, and I actually have a certain amount of experience here in working with the ADL on the subject, you have to stay 120% within the law. You cannot have anything questionable about you have to be better than a cop. You have to be far better than a cop, because you will not get the same consideration.
Which is why I'm saying it's not worth it now.
I would agree with you that you may be putting yourself at risk, but you have to ask yourself, is your community worth the risk? Would you rather be carried by 6 or tried by 12? And for me, that's always going to be 12. I'll take it.
Personally, I would defend my job if it was my business. So, if I owned the property, if it was my shop, yeah, but like if my regular 9 to 5 was facing down a crowd of an angry mob, I'm out.
I'm in I grew up in the North Orlando area, and now I'm in the Northwest Orlando area. My parents' house is about 40 minutes from where I live now. And now I'm really like soul searching and thinking about it. Like, if somebody had pitchforks right around my house in my area, I would defend it with a weapon. Like you're not going to take my home. But now I'm wondering, like, because remember, he had family in Kenosha, so I'm trying to think of it from Kyle's perspective. If people had pitchforks in my parents' side of town, would I go over there to defend the town square because I'm worried they might spread over to my parents? You know what? I'm kind of thinking about it now, and the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Because when I think about it, when I defend back when I worked for Tuscaloosa Pizza Hut in my parents' side of town, and now I'm doxing myself. Would I have defended the Pizza Hut I worked for with a gun? Probably not. But then if I think of the larger implications of, well, after they take Pizza Hut, is my parents' house going to get burnt down? And when I think of it in that context, I'm like, you know what? Maybe now I do show up with an AR-15 against rioters. So I'm literally having a crisis of myself, like right now on the stream, thinking about that. Like, it's not worth it to defend Pizza Hut, but it is worth it to defend my community.
Let me offer you, a compromise for that for yourself. I would draw a line in the, like, this is where my neighborhood starts. This is where my family starts. And if you cross this, you are in danger. You are putting yourself in danger, and I will consider it self-defense. That is my line.
Go to my actual parents' house.
Yeah, kind of thing.
Defend it, yeah.
So, I'd like to move on here because it's getting late.
To my parents' house, which according to many government documents is where I still live, so I absolutely have castle doctrine at my parents' address.
Man, you just totally okay. Nathan Huerta says
this stream is now evidence.
Yeah. Nathan Huerta says, judging by this topic, I think someone has been playing Lost Judgment a lot recently. Is that true? Have we been playing this, whatever it is?
Never heard of it.
Okay.
Playing what?
Lost Judgment.
I presume it's a courtroom drama game.
Angel of Speed says, it doesn't matter if it's justified, intentional or not. Murder is always wrong and should be charged to the highest degree. So I think we're missing a little bit of
self-defense.
Yeah, I think we're missing a little bit of context here, Angel. Is self-defense murder? Now, I'm going to come at this from the perspective of a Christian, not necessarily, because I'll say this. I've only a couple of times in my life struck someone with hatred. Every other time I've gotten in a fight, it's been with the intention of self-defense. I just want you to stop attacking me or attacking someone that I care about, or to teach a lesson to prevent further violence in the future. So that's but like to just be like, I hate that guy and I don't want him around anymore. That is what the Bible defines as murder, and a lot of laws tend to agree, at least in if not in the wording, at least in the spirit. So unless someone has something to say to that, I'm going to move on to the last one.
I'm definitely going to touch on the issue of whether or not self-defense is murder. Are you kidding?
Sure, go for it.
Right.
Murder is a very specific term. You are committing deliberate, you are deliberately planning the killing of somebody. And if you're going to sit there and say that even self-defense is murder, which, as I understand, was actually in the original question, where they were saying, well, even in self-defense, it's still murder. If that's the case and you choose to lay down as somebody is beating your head in with a skateboard or pointing a Glock in your face, which happened in this instance, or even coming at you with their bare hands trying to wrestle your weapon or anything away from you in order to use it on you, that is your choice in the moment. And you may feel better about going to see your maker with that not on your conscience. But I do not believe that God or any other moral authority is actually going to say you're wrong for not laying down and dying in the face of the mob.
I think Angel of Speed is a pure pacifist that they commented, and I think this is in direct of what we were saying. If the defender makes someone dead, then yes. I believe that's saying that if the person acting in self-defense kills someone, then that is still murder. So I think Angel of Speed is a pure pacifist in that manner, and I disagree. I think killing in defense of your own life or the life of your loved ones is not murder and actually justifiable. But a pure pacifist, which I believe Angel of Speed is, would say that any time your actions result in murder, you are in the wrong and you're a murderer, which is a position that a lot of people hold. I just disagree with it. Remember, we promised. Angel of Speed confirmed. I am indeed a pacifist. We confirmed to the people that we tried to get on the stream that we were not going to, personally attack anyone. So, yeah, we clearly disagree. But I'm not going to ad hominem attack somebody just because they have different values than me. It's almost like we live in a society where we're supposed to be able to have different values.
Absolutely.
The last chat that I saved here was Random Pool Guy says Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself, and Ghislaine Maxwell is currently on trial. Good. Let's find everybody. Let's get them all. And I'm open.
Want names?
Yeah,
I want those billionaires exposed.
I want names. I want hard prison time. I want death penalty. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna incriminate myself on air here. I want death penalty for pedophiles.
On a totally unrelated note, who wants pizza?
Yay! Oh wow! I just got that Pizzagate hashtag LOL. I like the death penalty, but amnesty and life in prison for anyone who gives up the name of someone else. So if you're caught and busted as a billionaire pedo island person, if you give us the name of another one and lead us to another conviction, you get life in prison.
I'm not sure if I should reveal my power level on the subject of pedophilia.
We all hate pedophiles. Like you want pedophiles dead. We get it. I hate.
I was 6 and he was 12.
Oh fuck!
Should he have been put to death?
6 and 12? You're both children.
I was 6. He was 12. Exactly. So we're talking about a mitigating instance.
Yeah.
As much as I would like to find the guy, I know his name. I won't drop it here. I'd like to find the guy, tie him up, put his nuts in a blender, and then turn it on puree. That being said, I would not just outright murk him. I wouldn't do that. In fact, frankly, I would just rather, if it was even legal, it's been so long, the statute of limitations. But my whole thing is I have to turn this stuff over to matters of law. As much as I would like to do things the fact that we live in a society, we have a social contract, and the arbiter of that contract is the law, whether we like it or not. So,
Right.
very, very personal thing, just popping out there. But yeah, that's a red line I don't cross.
I respect that. That makes a lot of sense. I'm just saying that that in the Epstein thing was brought up in the hunt of trying to catch the all or as many billionaire pedophiles as we can. I'm saying that I would make the trade of, while I agree I would like death penalty for these billionaire pedophiles, I would be willing to make the trade of, if you help us find more of your kind, of your fellow billionaire pedophiles, we will give you, white collar resort prison for the rest of your life. I'm willing to make that trade. Is, okay, we caught you, but you can help us catch more? All right. Okay, you get the cushy life prison for helping us find more.
Gotta catch 'em all.
I'm personally willing to make that trade, because that means we get more.
Yes.
All right.
I
gotta wrap it up here. We're getting pretty late, but this was an excellent conversation, and I had trepidations at the when Cordero suggested it, but this turned out to be a very good conversation. I'm glad we had it. I know some of my other patrons were nervous about us taking backlash, but I think we're good here, and I think we've learned a lot. What do you gentlemen think?
I haven't said a single thing I regret. I would stand by everything I've said tonight.
Likewise, and I really think that if there's backlash, it's going to come from the people who didn't pay attention to what we said. They're not paying attention to the trial. They don't care about the evidence. They got their talking points from some talking head on TV, and that they just want to feel good about themselves being on what they think is the right side of history.
And for the record, we wanted more people who vehemently disagreed with us. We wanted more, and in the future, we'd like to have debates with people who are on a different side than maybe the three of us or others would be, and you will be treated with respect. Like, I can't stress it more. I would rather be wrong than be on just an ad hominem attack. You're a Nazi, you're a bigot, you're a commie killer, whatever. I don't want to be on that show, and I will leave that show if it devolves into that.
We had to be our own devil's advocates.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've certainly been there.
Great for us, pat ourselves on the back, but I'd rather actually have an opponent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming on tonight. I know it was a very short notice, last minute sort of put together stream. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm also grateful to all of my very generous supporters on Patreon, including these two here, especially those on the $10 and up tier, such as Cordero, who joined us tonight, as well as Princess Heather Blossom, Shady Oak Ministry, Sid McConroy, Autoknight, Emerald Spencer, Sodden, Girder, Senko, Kyle Christensen, DJ Skywalker, Stephen A. Wilson, Rein-Kun, Morningstar, QFlash, Billy Henline, Alden, MacManx, and Dark Malcontent, author of the Metaverse series. Please check out all their links in the description. If you'd like to be on the show, I'd love to have you. All you need to do is get on my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Some of the higher tiers have perks too. I would highly recommend checking those out. And there, your topic suggestions become priority. So if you want to get on the show and talk about something specific with us, like I said, we'd love to have you. That's how you do it. With that, I wish you all to have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe out there. God bless. And we will see you on the next one. Let me see. I'm most likely going to be on Princess Heather Blossom's stream tomorrow night at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And next week, there will actually be no live stream from me because that's going to be Thanksgiving weekend and I'm going to be out of state. Anyways, Cordero, say goodnight and tell us real quick one thing you learned tonight.
I learned that reasonable people can have reasonable discussion about sensitive topics. My policy is always, if we're debating something sensitive and political, is to be polite. And if we're debating pony lore and fantasy, I go straight for the jugular. Because calling you an idiot over your beliefs of zebra magic is funny. But calling you an asshole because you have a different real-life values opinion than me, that's not funny.
Indeed. And, yeah, well, I'm going to add to that real quick and say my goal every stream is to learn and to teach at the same time. Calbeck, give us one thing you learned tonight and say goodnight.
I like ham.
Actually.
All right. In that case, I
What?
will.
You needed more?
I
Applause.
expected more. I don't know if I needed it. I just expected it, and then it didn't happen, and you put me in a really awkward position. So I'm gonna end the stream now. Have a good night, everyone.